I'll go ahead and get us started. Welcome, everybody, to this mid-Holy Week service. This is officially Holy Wednesday, and there's a tradition in some of the more ancient Christian churches of on Holy Wednesday holding what's called a Tenebrae service, which is Latin for, I believe, darkness. Um, it's a somber service. It focuses on Christ's suffering, and what we're doing today is kind of inspired by that. Before we start, though, let me invite Karen. Do you want to say something about the upcoming sacred storytelling?
Yes, in 2 weeks, on the 15th, Don Wiley, who is here with us again tonight, is going to be our storyteller. And as I mentioned a couple of months ago, uh, when we are dealing with church history stories, we're dealing with the 19th century, the 20th century, and the 21st century. So we're going to be hearing an incredible 21st century story in 2 weeks about the Park Church in San Diego County, about its past, present, and future. And Don's going to be sharing his involvement from the very beginning up to today with that incredible uh, sharing within the community. Anything you want to add, Don?
Not really. Just be aware that it doesn't take a large group of people to have a major impact on a community.
So I'm really looking forward to Don sharing. And Don is also, Don, who's an evangelist, is going to be sharing our period of meditation with us also.
Great, thank you. So, if we were in person, I would have arranged the worship space so that it would be dark or dimly lit. There would be seven candles lit at the front of the service space. If you have a candle with you, I would invite you to light it now and to keep it lit through the service. I'm also I would encourage you, if you're able to dim your lights to create more of a dark kind of environment. I've just done that. I've turned off my light here. My computer's adjusting as it takes in the light from my window. And Nancy, I invite you to go ahead and launch us off by introducing for us what we'll be doing.
In observance of Holy Week, our worship service this evening centers on the sacred story of Christ's passion, his suffering, and death. Our engagement with this story will be guided by the principle that all human suffering is Christ's suffering. We find this principle in Jesus' parable of the Last Judgment in the Gospel of Matthew. In that parable, the Lord tells those at his right hand that whenever they helped a person who was suffering hunger or thirst or homelessness or nakedness or sickness or imprisonment, it was Christ whom they saw suffering, and it was Christ whom they had helped. All human suffering is Christ's suffering. The Book of Mormon teaches that Christ took upon himself the pains and the sicknesses of his people. Christ suffered pains and afflictions of all kinds so that he would know, according to the flesh, how to aid his people in their infirmities. Note that we were told there Christ shares human pains and affliction of all kinds. Again, all human suffering is Christ's suffering. As we retell this evening the story of Christ's passion, we will call to mind the many kinds of human suffering that Christ has made his own. Speakers will share with us experiences in which they have witnessed others' people's suffering, which is to say, they will share with us experience in which they have witnessed Christ's suffering. Near the end of today's worship, as our disciples' generous response, we will each be invited to silently recommit ourselves to work with Christ in his mission to end needless suffering.
Aaron, would you like to start us off?
Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. There was a garden there where Jesus had met many times with his disciples. He said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go and pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him. He began to feel distressed and agitated. He said to Peter, James, and John, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch." Going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." He returned to the three disciples and found them asleep. He said, "Could you not keep watch for 1 hour?" They did not know what to say.
I invite everyone to sing with me. Were you there in the garden while he prayed? Were you there in the garden while he prayed? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there in the garden while he prayed? Were you there with him in his soul's distress? Were you there with him in his soul's distress? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there with him in his soul's distress?
As he faces his impending violent death, Jesus suffers an episode of overwhelming mental and emotional distress, and he suffers it alone while his companions are sleeping. Jesus joins the many, many other members of his human family who have experienced various forms of mental or emotional distress: fear, depression, bereavement, mental illness, trauma, suicidal despair. And like Jesus, many of those others also suffered alone. So many are suffering in our world today. It seems like every time we turn on the news or check updates on our phones, we witness unimaginable suffering, whether it is on the bombed out streets of the Middle East or the Ukraine, or immigrants fearing to leave their homes in our very own cities and towns. But do we truly hear their cries of pain and fear, or are we too emotionally overwhelmed that we tune them out? I know I sometimes refuse to listen because of a sense of helplessness. Is this really any different than when the disciples fell asleep in Gethsemane? I know what has shaken me awake. It's hearing the stories of individuals, one on one, who are suffering. It was truly listening to the fear and near panic in the voice of a young woman I was mentoring when she thought that her father might not get his green card renewed. And it's stories I heard just about a week and a half ago at the church's European Peace Colloquy, when Russian and Ukrainian soldiers and conscientious objectors shared their story. Their courage and resolve, while also suffering unimaginable fear, definitely woke me up. So, during this Holy Week and beyond, let us not fall asleep in the Gethsemanes of our modern world. Let us try and stay awake so we can listen to and support, however we can, those who are suffering and oppressed. Christ, you share the sufferings of the whole human family. When else have we seen your suffering, mental or emotional distress?
I've invited Randy Marsh to participate with us this evening. Randy, I'll turn over to you.
Jesus said to the disciples, "Get up, let us be going." He was still speaking when Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a detachment of soldiers, together with police sent by the chief priests. They came with torches and swords and clubs. Now the traitor had arranged a signal with them, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man you want. Arrest him." So when he came, he went up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, teacher," and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Judas, is it with a kiss that you are betraying the Son of Man?" Then they laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. All the disciples deserted him and fled.
Again, I invite you all to sing with me. Were you there? Did you see the traitor's kiss? Were you there? Did you see the traitor's kiss? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there? Did you see the traitor's kiss? Were you there when his friends fled from his side? Were you there when his friends fled from his side? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when his friends fled from his side?
Jesus is betrayed by a trusted companion. He is then abandoned as his other companions flee the scene. Jesus thus shares in the suffering of the many people who have been, in one way or another, betrayed, deceived, or exploited by someone they trusted. A friend, a family member, a mentor, a leader, a faith community, a government, an institution in which they had invested time or energy or money, in which they had trusted to be likewise invested in them. Jesus shares in the suffering of the many people who have been, in one way or another, abandoned, ignored, forgotten, shunned, rejected, left on their own. I'm affiliated with a girls' safe house in Kenya, Africa, in Nairobi area. And there was a girl brought to the gate who was a young girl who was pregnant and had been raped by a teacher. And they asked if we could take her in and keep her until after the baby was born and the court case, if there was going to be one, was settled. We took the young girl into the house and she had her baby. And then after a while, Children's Services felt like it was time for her to be reintegrated with her family. So she was sent to live with her mother, but her mother decided she wasn't ready to take care of her, and so she was going to stay with her grandmother instead, and this was in the rural area. This young girl got to go back to school, but the school that she went to was where the teacher was that had raped her. Every day she went to school, she was re-victimized by seeing this teacher standing there. The grandmother, with the granddaughter being in school, and the grandmother needed to go to the market to sell tomatoes every day, decided that she would give an herb to the baby so the baby would sleep all day at the house by itself. This girl called the safe house, crying and sobbing and pleading for them to come and get her and help her. They had not done that before, but they did go back and they did confirm everything that the girl had said. They contacted Children's Services while they were there and said they would take her back and keep her for 6 months until they could find a home for her for unwed mothers. But Children's Services said that that situation was okay with the mother and that they couldn't take her. And as they left, they could hear this girl sobbing and crying because of the circumstance that she had to live under. This young lady was abandoned and she was betrayed by a family member and by the government. Christ, you share the sufferings of the whole human family. When else have we seen you suffering betrayal or abandonment?
Rio?
They seized Jesus and bound him and led him away to the house of the high priest. The chief priests and their elders were assembled there. They were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. The high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus answered, I have spoken openly to the world. I've always taught in synagogues or in the temple. I've said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. They know what I said. When Jesus said this, one of the police struck him on the face, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" Jesus answered, "If I said something wrong, testify to the wrong. But if I spoke rightly, why do you strike me?" Many witnesses came forward and testified falsely against Jesus, but their statements did not agree. Jesus remained silent and would not say a word.
Once again, I invite folks to sing with me. Were you there when they took him bound away? Were you there when they took him bound away? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they took him bound away? Were you there at his pretense of a trial? Were you there at his pretense of a trial? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there at his pretense of a trial?
When Jesus is arrested, he loses his freedom. Many other people through human history have suffered restrictions on their freedom. Whether due to imprisonment, just or unjust, both cause suffering. Political oppression, slavery, the systematic subordination of women or ethnic groups or classes or despised minorities. Jesus is put through the motions of a trial whose outcome is predetermined. He thus joins the many, many human beings who, in one way or another, have suffered injustice. Back when I was a teenager, my ward group would do religious services for a local assisted living center. And I always found this incredibly uncomfortable and unfortunately not fulfilling, because the sense that I had while I was there at this very well run institution that seemed to be full of comparatively happy people who are happy to see us. My sense was of a great deal of simple, pervasive suffering that I did not know how to address and felt shame at not trying to address. I always felt like I could have talked more with people or been more engaged, but I was shy and withdrawn, to my understanding. Many years later, a person who had been an adult supervisor of that group, our church group, told me that he was always very, very impressed at how eager I seemed to be to go and how much I cared about doing it. I was very surprised at the very different perspective that he had on that experience. Because as I did not alleviate any concrete, obvious suffering to my eyes. And I don't know how much a simple visit to brothers and sisters in the prison of advancing age accomplished. But I remember the sense of powerlessness and shame at that powerlessness, most of all, from that time.
Christ, you share the sufferings of the whole human family. When else have we seen you suffering captivity or injustice? Barb?
Very early in the morning, they led Jesus away to the palace of Pilate, the Roman governor. They accused Jesus, saying, "We found this man inciting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be the Messiah, a king." Jesus did not reply to a single charge. Pilate had Jesus flogged. Then he handed Jesus over to be crucified. The governor's soldiers took Jesus into the courtyard of the palace and called together the whole cohort. They stripped Jesus and put a purple cloak on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand and knelt before him and mocked him, calling out, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head. After mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes back on him. Then they led him away to crucify him.
Were you there when they crowned his head with thorns? Were you there when they crowned his head with thorns? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crowned his head with thorns? Were you there when they spit and mocked and jeered? Were you there when they spit and mocked and jeered? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they spit and mocked and jeered?
Jesus suffers humiliation and abuse in the form of flogging by the sadistic mockery that precedes his execution. He joins the many, many other human beings over the course of history who have suffered various forms of humiliation and abuse. Bullying, harassment, public ridicule or shaming, stereotyping, exploitation, child abuse, elder abuse, domestic violence, psychological or emotional violence, sexual violence, abusive relationships of many kinds. The image that you see on your screen is Georg Safka as an adult. And as an adult, he reflected on a time when he felt humiliated and bullied. He wrote about it in a church periodical called The Restoration Witness. And when I thought of humiliation and abuse, I couldn't help but think of Georg Sofka. The story that he shares is about him when he was 11 years old, living in Germany during World War II, during Nazi rule. He lived with his mother in a shared home where a Polish couple also lived. Shortly after this Polish couple arrived, the woman gave birth to a child. And a year later, that child became gravely ill and passed away. Well, Georg's mother worked much of the day and wasn't able to go to the funeral in support of the grieving parents. But the time of the funeral allowed Georg to go in support of his friends before he needed to report to school. And as he was walking to the funeral, he crossed paths with his teacher. His teacher was a former general in the German army and a member of the Nazi Party. The teacher was well aware of what Georg was doing and did not approve. Georg went to the funeral anyway. And when he arrived in school, in class later that day, the teacher singled him out and humiliated him in front of his classmates, in front of the school. He humiliated and said, "Look at Sofka over there. He calls himself a German. I don't suppose he's noticed we're in the 5th year of the war, for it seems he attends the funeral services of his enemies." Georg reflected, he was well aware we were in the midst of war. He had lost his older brother. His brother had been killed during the conflict. But he said that in his home, they were raised to love your enemies. They were taught that Jesus said to love your enemies. He was practicing that when he was called in front of the class and humiliated and abused by his teacher and his classmates. Christ, you share the sufferings of the whole human family. When else have we seen you suffering humiliation or abuse?
Seth. Sorry, I think I just muted you.
Okay. They took Jesus to a place called Golgotha, which means the skull. There they crucified him. The soldiers divided his clothes among themselves by throwing dice to decide what each should take. They then sat down and kept watch. Looking on from a distance were many women who had come with Jesus to Jerusalem. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James the younger, and Joseph, the mother of the sons of Zebedee, and Salome. These women had followed him when he was in Galilee, ministering to him. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. At about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you abandoned me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "He is calling for Elijah." Jesus said, "I am thirsty." Someone took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and offered it to him to drink. But the others said, "Wait, let's see if Elijah will come to save him." Jesus again gave a loud cry and breathed his last.
Were you there when they nailed him to the cross? Were you there when they nailed him to the cross? Oh, sometimes it causes me to Tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to the cross? Were you there through the hours until he died? Were you there through the hours until he died? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there through the hours until he died?
On the cross, Jesus suffers prolonged physical agony, as well as deprivation, nakedness, exposure, thirst. He shares the experience of billions of human beings who have suffered intense physical pain, whether caused by disease or childbirth or accident or assault or torture. Jesus shares the experience of millions of people who have suffered deprivation because of poverty or natural disaster or environmental degradation or dangerous migrations or the devastation of war. While I was traveling in the Philippines 2 months ago, I stopped for a few days in Italy. At the Vatican, there were long lines stretching all across St. Peter's Square, all waiting to go inside and experience the art, the history, and for many, the divine encounter of that sacred place. But in the gutter beside St. Peter's Square was a man begging, clothed in rags, pleading for coins, rattling his cup. I wrote this in my journal. His body was bent, face downward and covered. I never saw his face. Feet were bare, swollen, red, wrapped in rags, toenails in terrible condition. At first I thought he was a street performer, it being too biblical, too archetypical. Surely this is makeup, a performance to look like a beggar that Jesus would encounter. The smell told me that it was not makeup, not a street performance. I dropped a coin in his cup, a half-euro, maybe 60 cents, not much, but it was all that I had. He cried out, "Grazie, grazie, grazie," shaking as his raspy voice let out his thanks. Nearby in the curved portico, an immense line of hundreds, maybe thousands, waited to enter St. Peter's to experience Christ in the overwhelming opulence and artistry, and my heart cried out, "Here he is! Here he is, rotting away in the gutter." When I arrived in the Philippines a few days later, this image continued to haunt me. One day while I was eating a meal near the town square in Rojas, a boy approached me. He was the age of my youngest son, Danny, around 13. He couldn't close his mouth due to some congenital defect, and so he was constantly drooling, a towel around his shoulders to dab at his mouth. As he approached, others looked away, not wanting him near their food. A few gave him a few pesos, but most just ignored him. I was tempted to also give him a coin or two, and then I remembered the man begging at the Vatican. Now, I don't always give a large sum to those who beg on the streets. It is well known that children who beg in places like that often take their money they gather back to an unscrupulous adult or gang who barely provide them shelter and food in exchange. So giving is supporting an unjust, unhealthy situation. Still, I felt moved, so I reached into my wallet and pulled out 3 bills, each worth 50 pesos, about as much as my meal at Jollibee had cost, maybe $3 US. A look of disbelief came across his face, then a smile, as he ran off. A few hours later I encountered him again. I reached into my wallet and he shook his head no, as if to say, "You've given enough." I handed him a mission prayer card with the church's name and website. It wasn't much, but it felt like it was all that I could do in that time and place, hoping to plant a seed, or maybe just some comfort. He looked at the card, smiled, and then gave the Filipino Sign Language gesture for I love you, which is the same as American Sign Language. I still think about the two of them and the challenges that they face. Christ, you share the sufferings of the whole human family. When else have we seen you suffering physical pain or deprivation?
Diane and Joe, you'll both need to unmute.
Open your hearts and feel the yearnings of your brothers and sisters who are lonely, despised, fearful, neglected, unloved.
Reach out and under.
Go ahead.
Reach out in understanding, clasp their hands, and invite all to share in the blessings of community.
Created in the name of the one who suffered on behalf of all.
One of you should go.
Much physical and emotional violence has been done to some of God's beloved children through the misuse of Scripture. The Church is called to confess and repent of such attitudes and practices.
Help people soothe and resolve the brokenness and pain in their lives.
God, the eternal creator, weeps for the poor, displaced, mistreated, and diseased of the world because of their unnecessary suffering.
Open your ears to hear the pleading of mothers and fathers in all nations who desperately seek a future of hope for their children. Do not turn away from them.
These are portentous times. The lives of many are being sacrificed to the gods of war, greed, and avarice. You must be in the forefront of those who would mediate this needless destruction.
Is
that me?
Yep.
As Christ's body lovingly and patiently bear the weight of criticism from those who hesitate to respond to the divine vision of human worth. The burden is yours for divine purposes, and always remember the way of suffering love that leads to the cross leads also to resurrection.
Thank you. So we've been mindful this evening of the various ways in which human beings suffer, in which human beings are suffering right now as we speak. And we have heard the Spirit calling us to do what lies in our power to aid Christ in his mission to end human suffering. So we're going to do now a combined prayer for peace and disciples' generous response. We're going to have a few minutes of silence. And when I say a few minutes, I mean a good 4 to 5 minutes. So settle into the silence. Let the Spirit breathe. See where it takes you. See what the Spirit wants to pray silently through you. But I invite you during that silence to pray for people in the world today who are suffering. and also to recommit yourself to Christ's mission to end needless suffering. Let's take a few moments in silence. The scriptures tell us that Christ's light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. But from our vantage point, it doesn't always look that way. And with that thought in mind, I invite you now to blow out your candle. We're now going to have our sending forth, which will be read for us by Jim. After the sending forth, we'll sing one more time, and then there will be a silent message flashed on the screen. And after that, I invite you to depart in silence. Jim, whenever you're ready, unmute and read for us.
Toward evening, a rich man from the town of Arimathea came, named Joseph. He also was a disciple of Jesus. This man went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Joseph took down the body, wrapped it in a linen cloth, and placed it in a tomb that had recently been cut out of rock. Then he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb and went away. The women who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed Joseph and saw the tomb and how Jesus' body was laid in it. The Sabbath was about to begin. The women returned home and prepared spices and perfumes, but they rested on the Sabbath as the law commanded.
Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they laid him in the tomb?